Good evening and welcome to a new episode of our weekly program On the Hot Seat. And today we're going to have a very exclusive interview and get to know more about where the Egyptian economy lies. And we're going to be talking about unemployment, underemployment and labor forces. We're very much delighted to have joining us here on this exclusive interview Dr. Ibrahim Awad, Professor of Global Affairs at the AUC and also the former Director of ILO, International Labour Organization Officer for North Africa.
My pleasure.
Doctor, I would want to take this advantage to know more from you and from your field of experience of how do you view the current labor condition here in Egypt, generally speaking, whether it's labor for the public sector or for the private sector?
Well, I guess you mean situation of the labor market.
Yes.
In Egypt. Well, the labor market in Egypt has problems which are known to all concerned, and these problems do not date back from a few years, but the problems are long-standing. They have been made more serious in the last few years because of the slowdown in economic activity that the country has witnessed in the last few years. The situation has also been affected by the consequences of the political situation and the political instability in the country. So the political instability in the country has resulted in economic slowdown. The activity, internal activity, has slowed down on the one hand, but then you also had a crisis in tourism revenues. Add to that the results of the slowdown in the global economy. It's not only a slowdown in the Egyptian economy, but in the global economy, which resulted in reduced revenues of the Suez Canal, for instance, because of the reduction in international trade. The instability in countries, in bordering countries also, not only in Egypt, for instance, in Libya, which hosted something around 1.5 million Egyptian workers, at least. All of this has, of course, resulted in decreasing revenues in the country, and of course in reduced demand for labor. And when you have the reduced demand for labor, the result is either unemployment or you have underemployment, and underemployment has a consequence of you will be working, and yet you will not make enough money. You will not have an income sufficient to support you and your family. So it is a question not only of unemployment, it's a question of unemployment, underemployment, yes, and associated poverty.
I'm glad you mentioned, Doctor, the underemployment issue, because for very long years, as you said, it's very complicated here in Egypt, and many people, even if they're graduates of schools from different universities, they always have this problem of being forced to do or work a job that is not really, either it's not from their specialization or from their field of study, or it's underpaid because maybe they have so much potentials that is overrated for the job description or the position, and as a result the revenues are not increasing, and people are not being trained, or they want to sort of encourage themselves to be better in what they do because simply they're doing it by force. Now, today here in Egypt, how do you see that this could change, possibly new strategies, new laws? How can this problem be resolved?
Well, Egypt, of course, is not alone in this situation, first of all. The situation of underemployment exists in many countries, in particular in developing countries, because in developing countries, workers cannot stay idle. So if there are not formal jobs for them, or jobs in the formal economy, they would go to the informal economy where they can work for fewer hours than they would be ready to work because they need to have an income. in developing countries, there are no social security systems,
Yes.
or there are no effective social security systems, and the poor cannot stay idle, so they work even for a few hours per day or a few hours per week, which take them off statistics of unemployment. So this is why we say that unemployment is not sufficient as an indicator of the labor market situation. But then you've pointed out something which is extremely important, which is what used to be called underemployment in respect of the qualifications and skills of the worker, which is now in statisticians called rather inadequate employment, in the sense that you have a medical doctor working as an administrative assistant. It's exactly what you said. So, of course, this person is not making full use of its potential, of his or her potential. And so this is waste, in fact, of skill. And you're underemployed. Your potential is not employed fully. Therefore, it is underemployed. So it's inadequate employment. And of course, the result is a lower income than this person is entitled to in accordance to his or her qualifications. But of course, this also has to do with the structure of the economy.
Yes.
You see, if the structure of the economy is heavy on the side of low technology process of production, then those who are highly skilled, very highly educated, there's no demand for them.
This is why they seek to immigrate or to go to other countries.
Absolutely. This is a very important observation. So, if you are extremely well trained, but then your country does not produce what you have been trained for, so either you will find another job of lower quality than the job your education qualifies for you for, or you stay unemployed, or you emigrate. You see, so the question really is about the structure of the economy that should generate demand for people of all levels of skills and all levels of education, because we should not only be focused with the very highly educated. Of course, I recognize it is a tremendous problem in Egypt, and not only in Egypt, that the highly educated are those who have the higher unemployment rate. Again, for the reason that I explained to you, that the economy really does not generate sufficient demand for them. But then you have those who are not highly educated, and those whose numbers are far larger than the highly educated. These also should be the objects of policy. Policy should not only be concerned with the very highly educated, because the not so highly educated probably are not unemployed, because they work for a few hours a week, because they cannot afford, and therefore we consider that, or some consider that, the problem has been solved because they are not unemployed. No, not at all.
Exactly.
Because they may be working but making very, very little money, money that corresponds to the 3 or 4 hours that they work daily or even weekly, because I don't know if you're aware of that, but an unemployed is a person, a worker, who did not work 1 hour last week. 1 hour. So if you work 1 hour, you are employed.
This is exactly what I want to ask you for. I mean, we're going to get back to the immigration issue, but I'm going to ask you a compound question rather. I don't know if you agree or not. We have maybe this problem here in Egypt, very noticeable in the government or the public sector. As you've said, so many people they're considered employed, but they're not really working. and maybe, I don't know if this is as a result of administrative
No,
problem.
I'm not talking at all about these.
No, I'm asking you about
No,
this.
I'm not talking at all about the public sector. Or
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
talking about people in the street that may be helping you with your car, park your car, who work 3 hours a day
Yeah.
or 4 hours a day. People who sweep floors for 2 hours a week if you need them. People who do not have stable employment. These are the people I'm talking
Yeah, well,
about.
I'm talking about another sort of issue here. We're looking at the picture from another angle. The fact is that when the government says that it's probably employing 7 million or so Egyptians working or are in force in the government sector, and the capacity that it can hold for fully working, well, is 1 million Egyptian. What are they going to do with the 7 and 6 million Egyptians who are currently working in the government? Does that mean they're underemployed?
I'm not in agreement with the statement.
You're not in agreement.
No, of course not.
Why is that?
Because how many school teachers do you need in Egypt with a large population under 15 years of age? How many teachers?
I don't know. You tell me. There's 15 students supposedly per class, which doesn't really
15?
apply. In the private schools, they take a minimum of 15,
There
a
are
maximum of
people-
20, 25 per class.
I'm not talking about the private schools. The Egyptian population is educated in public schools.
Yeah, well, the public schools, it doesn't apply. Isn't that supposed to be a law that should be enforced generally on both the private and public
No, I
sector?
don't understand what you mean.
I mean, when you are in the public schools, you have a huge or large
Yes,
number
this
of
is- this is
students.
what-
But is that the way it should be? Is that the
Of
way it
course
should
not.
work? Yeah. So
So my question is, how many teachers do you need for the large cohorts under 15 years of age?
how many?
Over a million. Education alone, well over a million. How many do you need medical doctors to take care of the failing health situation in the country, the hepatitis C and all of this? So, in fact, government employment is not that large in Egypt. Contrary to what is being repeatedly said, it's not that large in Egypt. If you think of the services that a population of 90 million needs, it is absolutely not possible to think in terms of 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5 million. The question is, how are they distributed among government administrations, functional administrations, and regionally? How are they distributed? And then what are the means that are given to the civil service in order to perform well their function? So there are arguments that spread around which do not correspond to reality. 6 million, there are 6 million civil servants, even 7 million. 7 million out of 90 million, that's around 8% or 7% of the population. Do you know the percentage in Sweden and Norway? 18%. So I think we should look closely at that. The problem of now, the question is the wage bill, public wage bill, relative to the gross domestic product of the country. It is high in Egypt.
Okay.
This is the problem. You see, this is the problem. But why is that so? It is because the economy does not produce enough wealth and income, because of the very low productivity of the economy and the very low technological content of the economy. So the question really is about developing the economy, raising productivity, so as to produce enough revenue, enough income that would help you support a better performing civil service, and of course a much better performing private sector, because the private sector is also very low technology private sector. I'm not talking about the large companies that you see, but the private sector is all of those small commerce that you see around.
Yeah, I know technology plays a very important part, but when you say that we should produce more, or if there should be more productivity in order for, the wealth of the country to sort of come up and
To support.
to support the economy. So if we're going to talk about the labor force here, what do you think is missing? What steps should they take? What elements should be followed in order for this circle to, or the wheel to sort of move forward? Do you think that they lack training? Again, maybe they're not being put in the correct position, or their job qualifications are not meeting their potentials or the demand of the job? How does it work?
I think you have to intervene at several levels at the same time. Question is not only a question of training of people. You just said that people may be very well trained, and yet they may migrate because they do not find jobs. In fact, it is demand. You should generate demand for these jobs, and demand for these jobs will only result from upgrading the economy and introducing skills and technology in the economy. And this is how you would be able to raise the wealth and income produced by the economy, you see. So, of course, you should train the labor force. Of course, you should train the labor force. But we know that the most educated are unemployed. So is it, of course, there is an argument that these are educated, but they don't have skills. But in reality, had there been demand for them, education would have been better. And allocations to education would increase. But in reality, because in fact they are not really in demand, so there are no enough allocations for education, and therefore the skills also are deficient. So I think you should intervene at both the structure of the economy. We need to intervene at the structure of the economy. Of course, this needs long discussions. How we intervene in structures of the economy, which sectors, which branches of economic activity you would address, which units of production, large or small. So, which technologies you will use. So, all this is a whole discussion. And at the same time, you should address also the labor force. Labor itself. And I should address both in a way that labor meets the demand of the economy. Demand coming either from the private sector or from the government and public sector. So it is really a complex question. It cannot be solved in a facile manner. It cannot be solved with just wishes. It is a long-term process which we address very seriously on the basis of analysis and on the basis of real work.
If I might ask you also about corruption, and how do you think if or not it had played a role in the deteriorating economic situation here in Egypt in general, whether it's in the labor force, it's in the administrative hierarchy of any organization or institute, the syndicates possibly that different labor forces might belong to, whether it's independent or not. How has that changed the status of Egypt during the past 30, 40 years?
You see, corruption is everywhere. Everywhere, something that should be fought. Corruption is eats at the foundations of any economy and any society. Not only the economy, the society, in fact. This having been said, corruption may be a consequence and not only the cause of a certain situation. If you have a skewed distribution of power, of economic, social, and political power, the consequence is corruption. And corruption, of course, then continues undermining so it is some sort of a vicious circle. Yeah. It becomes a vicious circle. But it's interesting if you could look at countries which are the least corrupt, are countries where you have the better and more egalitarian distribution of resources, both economic and political and social resources. So from this, you infer that a good distribution of resources, economic, political, and social, and cultural, such a better distribution is essential to fight corruption. So corruption, you fight it piecemeal. Of course, if someone is corrupted, you have to address, but you have to address the structures that generate corruption.
And finally, Dr. Ibrahim, from your field of experience and your analysis, and with all the changes that have been taking place in Egypt during the past 5 years, whether it's political, social, economic, where do you see Egypt in the future?
You see, Egypt will have to address its the questions that affect it very seriously. These questions are not addressed by voluntarism. It's not because you wish something that this something materializes. You need to analyze. You need to utilize knowledge. You need to have a scientific approach and a political approach, because social matters are not inanimate matters. People have agency. People have their will. You cannot assume that people will take everything that you decide. So this is where politics comes in. So it is a political approach, and of course, knowledge, scientific, analytical approach. And both of them will be necessary to address the multiple issues, multiple questions, or if you wish, multiple problems that Egypt faces. There are no problems without solutions.
Exactly, absolutely.
If you identify something as a problem, in fact, you have already said that there is a solution for this problem. So, but of course, you need to address this problem with respect to people who suffer from the problems, and with respect to the problem itself.
Yes, absolutely. On this note, unfortunately, we have to end our interview here. We're very much delighted to have you joining with us here on the hot seat on Nile International. Dr. Ibrahim Awad, Professor of Global Affairs at the AUC, and also the former Director of ILO, the International Labour Organization Officer for North Africa. Thank you very much for your time, and we do hope that we get to interview you sometime soon. Thank you.
It will be a pleasure. Thank you very much.
This brings us to the end of our episode of On the Hot Seat. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International.